Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a major trade standoff that's putting two of the world's biggest democracies on a collision course. And this is the number at the very heart of it all: 50%. It's a staggering new tariff the United States has slapped on India, escalating what was a trade dispute into a full-blown diplomatic crisis. A move this sudden, this severe, has pretty much everyone asking the same question. Is this really just about trade? Or is it something more? Is this geopolitical arm twisting? Okay, let's get into it. So here's how we're going to break this down. We'll look at how we even got to 50%, we'll cover Washington's side of the story, and then we'll look at Delhi's defiant stand. After that, we'll size up the economic damage, and finally, we'll ask the big question: what does this mean for the entire U.S.-India relationship? First up, let's just look at how quickly this whole thing deteriorated. What started out with a lot of optimism just completely fell apart. The speed of this collapse is, well, it's pretty stunning. You go from optimistic meetings in February and presidential promises of a very big deal in June, and then it all just unravels. By the end of July, boom, the first 25% tariff hits. And then just a week later, it doubles to 50%. We're talking handshakes to hardball in less than 6 months. So you have to wonder, why would Washington make such a drastic move against a country that's supposed to be a key strategic partner? Well, the official reasoning has a few layers, but there's one issue that really stands out. And here it is. The primary justification, stated very bluntly by President Trump, is that this is punitive. The tariffs are a direct response to India continuing to buy discounted Russian oil, which the U.S. says is basically fueling the war in Ukraine. But let's be clear, it's not just about the oil. These tariffs are also being used as a lever to deal with a whole list of other frustrations. You've got the huge trade deficit, India's deep, long-standing defense ties with Moscow, and even a pushback against the BRICS bloc's move away from the U.S. dollar. It's a really complex cocktail of economic and geopolitical pressure. And to really put that 50% figure in perspective, just look at this chart. India, a strategic partner, is now facing the exact same tariff level as Brazil, and a rate that's way higher than what's imposed on geopolitical rivals like China. That really tells you how targeted this move is. Okay, so how has India responded to all this pressure? Well, not by backing down, that's for sure. Instead, Delhi has drawn its own lines in the sand, and it's accusing Washington of hypocrisy and using a blatant double standard. Prime Minister Narendra Modi came out with this really defiant statement, framing this whole thing as a defense of India's most vulnerable people and as a matter of national dignity. He's basically positioning this as a fight for India's ability to stand on its own 2 feet. And these are the red lines where the talks completely fell apart. India is saying absolutely no to duty-free access for U.S. farm goods and is banning American GM crops. They argue that opening up these protected sectors would just devastate the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of their citizens. So for Delhi, this is completely non-negotiable. India's foreign ministry didn't mince words. They've called the tariffs unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. And a huge part of their argument is what they see as pure hypocrisy. They're pointing out that other U.S. allies, including countries in the EU, are still buying Russian energy but aren't getting hit with these kinds of tariffs. So let's talk about the real-world impact of this tariff war. Because beyond all the political back and forth, the numbers are starting to paint a pretty stark and worrying picture for the Indian economy. Yeah, according to the financial giant Morgan Stanley, if this 50% tariff sticks around for a while, it could slash India's GDP growth by almost a full percentage point, up to 0.8%. For one of the world's fastest growing economies, that is a massive blow. And you can see how it hits specific, really labor-intensive sectors the hardest. We're talking about industries like textiles, gems and jewelry, leather goods. These are huge employers, and they depend heavily on the American market. Exporters in these areas are already sounding the alarm about canceled orders and seeing business go to their regional competitors. The stakes here are just immense. You're looking at nearly $87 billion in annual exports to the U.S. that are at risk. It's no wonder analysts are calling this a severe setback for the Indian economy. So, Beyond the immediate economic pain, there's an even bigger question looming. What's the long-term damage to the U.S.-India partnership itself? Many foreign policy experts are really worried, and they're warning that this is so much more than just a trade spat. They see this as a crisis that could actually unravel decades of careful, painstaking diplomatic work that built up this idea of the two democracies as natural allies. And this quote from veteran analyst Ashley Tellis really sums it up. He calls it a potential slow motion catastrophe, arguing that a quarter century of hard-won diplomatic gains are just being unraveled by this needless crisis. And other experts, like former State Department official Evan Feigenbaum, they warn that the whole partnership is at risk of becoming a football in American domestic politics. And that's dangerous because it eats away at the stable bipartisan support that's been the foundation of the relationship for years. So that leaves us with this final provocative thought. Is what we're seeing just a temporary fallout, something that can be fixed down the line? Or is this a fundamental realignment, a moment where Washington's pressure tactics actually risk pushing a key partner away for good and maybe closer to other global blocs like BRICS? The answer to that could reshape global alliances for years to come.